The silence in the medical board hearing room was deafening as Dr. Rebecca Chen, my own sister, finished her presentation. On the projector behind her, slides full of carefully selected data painted a damning picture of my research. As you can see, she concluded, her voice carrying the authority of Johns Hopkins' youngest department chair. Dr. Sarah Chen's methodology was fundamentally flawed. Her conclusions about the experimental treatment cannot be trusted. In my professional opinion, she is unfit to continue practicing medicine. I sat perfectly still, my hands clasped tightly in my lap to hide their trembling. 15 years of research, countless late nights in the lab, all my work on developing new treatments for rare genetic disorders, destroyed in a 40-minute presentation. My name is Dr. Sarah Chen, and at 35, I was watching my sister systematically dismantle my career. The same sister who had once shared my dreams of changing lives through medical research. The same sister who had worked alongside me in our parents' small medical practice growing up. The same sister who had always been the brilliant one. Dr. Maxwell, head of the medical board, cleared his throat. Dr. Sarah Chen, do you have any response to these allegations? I looked up at the board numbers, people I'd known and respected for years. Their faces were carefully neutral, but I could see the doubt in their eyes. Rebecca's reputation preceded her, the prodigy, the innovator, the one who had revolutionized genetic research methods. The data presented, I began, my voice steady despite everything, doesn't tell the complete story. If you look at the full data set, which mysteriously can't be found, Rebecca interrupted smoothly. How convenient. I felt my cheeks burn. The original data from my early trials had indeed gone missing from the hospital servers 2 weeks ago, right around the time Rebecca had started her investigation into my research. I have backup copies in my lab, I said. I can provide. The board has seen enough, Dr. Maxwell interjected. We'll take a brief recess to discuss these findings. As the board members filed out, I caught Rebecca's eye. For a moment, I saw something flicker across her face. Satisfaction? Regret? But then it was gone, replaced by her usual mask of professional detachment. I walked out of the hearing room in a daze, barely registering the sympathetic looks from colleagues in the hallway. My phone buzzed. A text from Dr. James Harrison, my mentor, and the only person who had stood by me through this nightmare. My office, now. James was waiting when I arrived, his normally cheerful face grave. At 65, he had seen his share of academic politics and professional rivalries, but even he seemed shaken by what had just happened. Why? He asked simply as I sank into the chair across from his desk. I shook my head, fighting back tears. Because she could. Because she's always had to prove she's better, smarter, more successful. This isn't about sibling rivalry, Sarah. This is career assassination. What really happened with that data? I leaned forward, lowering my voice though we were alone. 2 weeks ago, I made a breakthrough. The treatment was showing unprecedented success rates in the latest trials. I was double-checking everything before submitting for peer review when Rebecca started her investigation, James finished. Exactly. And suddenly my access to the hospital servers was temporarily suspended for review. When I finally got back in, key files were corrupted or missing. James' eyes narrowed. She wouldn't she? I laughed bitterly. Rebecca has spent her entire career being the star, the genius, the one who makes headlines. And now her older sister might have stumbled onto something bigger than anything she's done. But your backup data is in my private lab notes, which is why I need you to do something for me. I pulled a key from my pocket and slid it across his desk. In my lab, bottom drawer of my desk, there's a locked box. When they suspend my privileges, I need you to get it for me. He took the key, his expression worried. Sarah, what are you planning? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed again. The board was reconvening. The decision was exactly what I expected. My hospital privileges were suspended pending a full investigation. My research grants were frozen. My reputation, the thing I'd spent my entire career building, was in tatters. Rebecca didn't even look at me as she packed up her presentation materials. She had done what she came to do. That night, sitting in my home office surrounded by years of research notes, I finally allowed myself to cry. Not just for my career, but for the patients who had been counting on my work, for the children with rare genetic disorders who had been part of my trials, who had shown such promising responses to the treatment. Then I saw it. In my earliest lab notebook, tucked between detailed trial notes and careful observations, was something I had forgotten about. A strange anomaly in one of the control groups, something that hadn't fit the pattern I was looking for at the time, so I had set it aside for later investigation. With trembling hands, I pulled out more notebooks, cross-referencing data points and patient responses. The pattern began to emerge, subtle at first, then unmistakable. My phone rang, making me jump. It was James. "I got the box," he said without preamble. "Sarah, you need to see this. The original data. It shows more than just success rates for your intended treatment. There's something else happening with the control group." "I know," I whispered, staring at my notes. "I just found it in my old notebooks." "James, this could be bigger than anything we imagined. But I need your help." "What do you need?" I took a deep breath. "Access to a lab. Somewhere private, off the grid. And I need you to help me gather some people we can trust completely." There was a pause on the other end. "This is about more than clearing your name, isn't it?" "Much more." Rebecca thought she was destroying my research, but she actually helped me see something I missed. Something that could change everything. Over the next few weeks, while the hospital conducted its investigation and Rebecca basked in the acclaim of protecting medical integrity, I worked in secret. James had connections with a private research facility on the outskirts of the city, one that wasn't affiliated with any major hospital or university. Dr. Maria Santos, a brilliant immunologist who had once faced similar accusations of misconduct, later proven false, offered her expertise. Dr. Chen, no relation, a genetic researcher who had worked with me on early trials, brought his experience with data analysis. Together, we began to unravel what my original notes had hinted at. The control group in my trials had shown an unexpected response, not to the treatment itself, but to something in the delivery mechanism, something that had implications far beyond rare genetic disorders. "This is incredible," Maria said one night, looking up from her microscope. "The cellular response, I've never seen anything like it. It's almost like the carrier molecule is triggering some kind of reset," Tom added, scrolling through data on his tablet, "like it's teaching the cells to heal themselves." I nodded, trying to contain my excitement. And because it wasn't what we were looking for originally, we almost missed it. The question is, how do we prove it without access to the hospital's resources? "We already have proof," James said quietly. He had been studying my original lab notes, comparing them with our new findings. "It's all here, documented, dated, verified." "Sarah, do you realize what this means?" I did. It meant that not only was my original research valid, but I had accidentally stumbled onto something potentially revolutionary, something that could change the way we think about cellular regeneration and healing, something that would make Rebecca's accusations look not just wrong, but catastrophically short-sighted. But I had to be careful. One wrong move, one leaked piece of information, and it could all fall apart again. That's when I got the text from an unexpected source. Dr. Linda Zhao, Rebecca's research assistant. "Need to talk. It's about the missing data." I met Linda at a small coffee shop far from the hospital, choosing a quiet corner booth where we wouldn't be easily noticed. She looked nervous, constantly checking her phone. "Rebecca doesn't know I'm here," she said immediately, her voice barely above a whisper. "If she finds out." "Why are you taking this risk?" I asked, studying her carefully. Linda pulled out a USB drive, sliding it across the table. "Because what she did was wrong. I was there when she accessed your files. She didn't just review them, she deliberately corrupted key data points." And she hesitated, glancing around before continuing. "I think I know why." I waited, my heart pounding. 2 months ago, she received some preliminary results from her own genetic research. They were disappointing. Years of work, millions in funding, and the results showed her approach was fundamentally flawed. Then she heard about your breakthrough. The pieces started falling into place. Rebecca's sudden interest in my research, the timing of her investigation, the missing data. It wasn't just about professional rivalry, it was desperation. "I made copies," Linda continued, nodding toward the USB drive. "Of everything, both the original files and the corrupted versions. The timestamps will show exactly when and how they were altered." I picked up the drive, trying to keep my hand steady. Why didn't you come forward during the hearing? Because it wouldn't have been enough, she said simply. Rebecca's reputation, her influence. She would have found a way to discredit me. But now, she smiled slightly, I hear you've made some interesting discoveries in your private research. News traveled fast in the scientific community, even when you tried to keep things quiet. I chose my next words carefully. How much do you know? Enough to know that what you found could change everything, and enough to know that Rebecca will try to stop you again if she finds out. She was right. The cellular regeneration mechanism we discovered wasn't just a scientific breakthrough, it was a potential goldmine. Patents, research grants, pharmaceutical development, billions of dollars were at stake. Back at the private lab, I shared Linda's revelations with my team. Maria immediately began analyzing the recovered data, comparing it with our new findings. This is perfect, she exclaimed after several hours. The original trial data completely supports what we're seeing now. With this, we can prove both the validity of your initial research and the significance of the new discovery. But we need to move fast, James cautioned. Once we go public with this, Rebecca will try to claim she knew about the regenerative properties all along, that her investigation was aimed at protecting this discovery. No, she won't, Tom said, looking up from his computer. Because I just found something interesting in these timestamps. The data corruption wasn't just about erasing success rates. Specific genetic markers related to cellular regeneration were targeted. She was trying to hide any evidence that might lead someone else to discover what Sarah found. She knew, I whispered. She saw the same pattern I did, but she couldn't replicate it in her own research, so she tried to bury it completely. The next few days were a blur of activity. We prepared our findings for publication, documented everything meticulously, and filed preliminary patents. I also did something else, something that went against every instinct I had as a scientist and a sister. I called our parents. Mom and Dad had stayed out of the conflict between Rebecca and me, maintaining what they called professional neutrality. But they needed to know the truth before everything became public. They sat in my living room, looking uncomfortable as I laid out everything. Rebecca's sabotage, the recovered data, and most importantly, the breakthrough we'd made. She was always so competitive, Mom said softly, staring at the evidence of data corruption. But this? Dad, a retired surgeon himself, was focused on the research findings. This regenerative mechanism, you're certain about this? I nodded. We verified it through multiple trials. It's real, Dad, and it could help thousands of people. The next morning, everything changed. Our research was published simultaneously in 3 major medical journals. The hospital board received copies of all the evidence, including Linda's documentation of the data tampering. Rebecca's reaction was swift and furious. She called an emergency press conference, ready to discredit our findings. But she was too late. I stood at the back of the conference room as she approached the podium, watching her confident smile fade as she realized half the seats were empty. The reporters who did attend were already holding copies of our published research. Dr. Chen, one of them called out, how do you respond to allegations that you deliberately corrupted your sister's research data to hide evidence of cellular regeneration properties? Rebecca's face went pale. That's not. And is it true that your own research in this area failed to produce results, leading to your investigation of Dr. Sarah Chen's work? She looked around desperately, but there was no escape. The truth was out, documented and verified by multiple sources. I didn't stay to watch her career unravel. I had more important things to do. 6 months later, our research had progressed beyond anything we'd initially imagined. The regenerative properties we discovered were being successfully tested in treatments for conditions we hadn't even considered initially. The hospital board not only reinstated my privileges but offered me my own research department. I declined politely. The private facility had become home, and my team there had earned my loyalty. Rebecca eventually left Johns Hopkins, taking a position at a smaller research facility on the West Coast. She never apologized, but she did send me an email. You won. But you also found something I couldn't. Maybe that's what I was really afraid of all along. I didn't respond. Some bridges, once burned, shouldn't be rebuilt. 1 year after the hearing that nearly ended my career, I stood in a different kind of meeting room. Instead of facing accusations, I was presenting our latest results to a group of patients and their families. a young girl with a rare genetic disorder, the kind I'd originally been trying to treat. Raise her hand. Dr. Chen, does this mean you can help people like me? I smiled, thinking of all the twists and turns that had led to this moment. Yes, I said. But you know what? You helped me too. Sometimes the best discoveries come when we're forced to look at things differently. After the presentation, James found me in my office. You never told them about Rebecca, he noted. I shook my head, looking at the framed copy of our first published paper hanging on the wall. Because this isn't about her anymore. It's about the work, about the people we can help. And about the sister who tried to destroy your career but accidentally helped you change the world. I laughed. Something like that. That evening, as I reviewed new trial data, I found myself thinking about patterns in research in relationships in life. Rebecca had tried to erase my work, but in doing so, she had forced me to look more closely to see what I had missed before. Sometimes the worst betrayals lead us to our greatest discoveries. Sometimes losing everything shows us what we're really capable of building. And sometimes the best revenge isn't about proving someone wrong. It's about proving yourself right in ways they never imagined possible.